So about a week ago, I posted a video explaining why I wasn't holding out a ton of hope for a Surface Duo 3 device, a device by Microsoft that would forego the dual screen loveliness of Surface Duo in exchange for a single folding OLED screen. And in that video, I very lightly touched on one aspect of why I'm not holding out a large amount of hope for that device, aside from just the hardware changes that I just don't think are going to go well. And in this video, I'm going to dig much deeper into that portion of it and give it much more context. And that specific topic is sort of Surface Duo's history and track record with software updates and how the software on Surface Duo has progressed. If we go back to the early days of Surface Duo, even Surface Duo 1, and take a look at where the software was back then, I think it's pretty obvious and easy to say that the software was in a much worse place than it is now. The touch response was so bad that when the first Duo came out, I was actually using on-screen controls rather than swipes to actually go home and do things like that. It was really bad. And since that, initial launch all the way back in 2020, Microsoft has delivered a ton of software updates for Surface Duo and Duo 2. In fact, if we go to the update history, going back there to September where there was a day one patch, and we scroll through this, look at all of the software updates that they have delivered. It's a lot. And they have had a significant impact on the device. Let's go over to Surface Duo 2. And obviously it's been out for 1 year less time. But even still in that amount of time, a ton of software updates that have indeed made the device much more stable, much less buggy, much more usable than it was when it first came out. And this is a big reason why I have been on the record many times as defending Microsoft for how they've handled the updates on Duo 1 and Duo 2. They have been frequent, and they have made a big difference on these devices. Duo 1 launched in a bad place and has improved dramatically. Duo 2 launched in a slightly less bad place, but still not great, and has also improved dramatically. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that all of the issues with these devices have been resolved. I would say the majority of them have been, but some stuff is still problematic for some people. The touch response is still not exactly where it should be, and you will still occasionally see the glitch where one screen turns off because it thinks it's been folded into phone mode. But by and large, they have been pretty greatly improved. Now, that being said, there have been large chunks of time where nothing significant happened, where we would get 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 security patches in a row where it's only a security patch. At least that's what the change log says. Now, I've also gone out on a limb and said that I think some of these security patches are not just security patches and that there's more stuff going on in the background. And in fact, with the help of another individual that knows more about this stuff, we've actually dug into some of these security patches and found that, yes, in fact, there were some essentially driver updates going on as well that the change log does not explicitly mention. Now, did it fix things? Did it improve things? Did it make things worse? We can't really say because it's really difficult to just look at a version number effectively changing on an internal driver, if you will, and determine, what exactly was changed or affected by this number changing. But at any rate, there have been these long stretches where there have been essentially nothing significant happening. Okay, so they are getting security patches out, which is better than nothing, and it's better than most OEMs do. How many companies are still delivering monthly security patches for devices that are a couple of years old? Very few OEMs actually even attempt such a thing, let alone actually accomplish it. So there's some good here, right? The updates have been impactful. They have gotten us to Android 12. We're going to dig in a bit more to that in a little bit because there's more to be said there. And the security patches have been frequent, but there have also been large periods of time where nothing much was going on, which we can't be super upset about because that's true of most OEMs. So you can kind of talk about this in two different ways. You can say, on one hand, they've only gone 2 months since launch without delivering something, right? And that's better than almost anybody else. But you can also turn around and say that the pace that they've introduced things that are significant, things like new Android versions, Android 11, Android 12, Android 13, is simply far too slow to catch up in any meaningful way with companies like Samsung, who not only have a massive head start when it comes to features, when it comes to Android versions, but are also continuing to get these versions out faster than Microsoft. Yes, there has been some overlap between Duo and, say, something like the Z Fold 2, the Z Fold 3, where they were both running the same version of Android at the same time, but the overlap was brief because, within a couple of months of Duo getting Android 12, Android 13 was out on the next fold and then was rolling out to the older folds. And even when they were on the same version, they were overlapping. The Z Fold has about 1 million features that Surface Duo does not have, and they are continuing to add new features. So this is kind of one way that I think about it. Duo started way down here with pretty much stock features, right? Almost nothing added on. And at the same time, Samsung with the Z Fold already had a bunch of added features because they're building on top of like a decade of work. So Duo's adding features, but Samsung's also adding features, and they're doing so at a similar rate. You could actually say Samsung is adding features even more rapidly than Microsoft is. So rather than that gap sort of, getting smaller, Microsoft catching up, it's really not happening. They're not catching up. They're adding stuff here and there, but they're not catching up. And in fact, they're probably losing ground, which is really, really disheartening. And there are like tons of really obvious features and things that they could add. Like, where are the inking features? Where is the ability to ink on your lock screen with the Surface Pen? We got a nice little menu, but like, that's it. That's the only thing that they have delivered. Where are the home screen features and customization? Why does Game Pass still crash? Why does my camera still why do I have no pro mode? Like, I could go on and on and on with all of the features that they could be easily adding. The screenshot function is still incredibly basic, okay? Like, it took them a long time just to make it so you could screenshot one screen and not the other, but like, add more stuff in there, right? Like, add in your own inking stuff onto the screenshots. There's a million things that you could do that they just haven't done. They've just not added to the feature set in so long. And to really throw salt in the wound, as of a few days ago, now not only has the LG Velvet with the dual screen case from a company that no longer even makes phones, not only has that Velvet received Android 13, the LG V60 has Android 13 as well. We are still stuck on Android 12 on Surface Duo. Again, let me repeat this. LG exited the phone market, and they're still supporting their phones better than Microsoft is. They have more features and newer versions of Android being rolled out to their dual screen devices. Microsoft has 2 phones to keep up with, and they just haven't gotten it done. So like I said, on one hand, the patches have been there. They have made a difference with overall usability, but on the other hand, it is just far too slow and far too little to make any meaningful ground against these other more established OEMs. And we've all seen the reports that Microsoft is going to start taking Android more seriously. They did a full, internal reorganization around Android, bringing all of their Android projects under one banner. This was supposed to improve things. But what we haven't actually seen is Microsoft behaving in a way that resembles a serious Android OEM. From the outside looking in, Surface Duo looks like a hobby that they kind of mess around with on the weekends, but not a serious endeavor. It doesn't look like they're pouring their resources into a project that they truly believe in. Now, the best case scenario for this is that Android 11 took about a year to get to Duo. Android 12 took about 8 months. Perhaps Android 13 comes in April, and it only took 6 months, and by the time Duo 3 is out, they're only routinely about 2, 3, 4 months behind on Android versions, which would not be that bad in the grand scheme of things. Perhaps 13 also brings with it a slew of new features that they've been working on since October. That they're just not giving us features in between versions. The features are coming with the big version upgrades. The idea there will be that Microsoft is basically playing a very conservative long game strategy. They're not really worried or concerned about what Duo 1 or Duo 2 are doing, how they're selling, what the perception of them is. They're really just using them as a platform to slowly build things out on to make a bigger push later on Duo 3. And this is plausible in my mind because So few people know about Duo and Duo 2 that if Duo 3 comes out, it's a folding OLED device and they literally call it something else. They, rather than calling it Surface Duo, they call it the Surface Fold or something like that. And it is built upon the foundation that they built for Duo and Duo 2. Probably won't matter to that mass market that they're trying to penetrate their way into, that the perception of Duo 1 and Duo 2 wasn't very good, because they probably don't know about that perception. They will probably look at the Surface Fold as a brand new first iteration device, when in fact those of us in the niche will know this is Duo 3 and it's not a first generation device. I think my biggest problem with this strategy is that it just sucks for those of us that bought in early, because we were basically being used as guinea pigs, as something to test this device on and a way to figure out what their next steps should be. They would basically be sacrificing their devoted, hardcore niche audience to try and find favor with a broader market that doesn't know that they make phones in the first place. And while I can understand why they're doing this, because there's just not enough money to be made with those of us subscribed to this YouTube channel, I just don't know how successful it's going to be, because all of it hinges on the idea that their past behavior will not be indicative of their future behavior with Duo 3, and you should never assume that to be the case. If a company has burned you once, they'll probably burn you again. Don't buy a phone based on what you think it will be when the software updates hit. Buy it for what it is when it's out. Don't just assume Microsoft will suddenly start getting this stuff right with Duo 3. It might be their aim, but until they've demonstrated it, you should not assume that's going to be the case. However, and yes, my door did just have to be closed, you're not in fact losing your mind, there is another interpretation to what we are seeing here, and it is that unfortunately Surface Duo is just on the back burner right now. We haven't seen any significant updates for 5 months because they're not really working on it all that hard right now. And I can kind of back this up a little bit. Let's jump over to this webpage here on Microsoft.com. It is a blog post titled, "What's New in Microsoft Teams, Rooms, and Devices at Enterprise Connect?" And you may be wondering to yourself, Shane, what on earth does this have to do with Surface Duo? But let's scroll down and I'll show you. Here is, I think, a significant portion of this blog post announcing the Microsoft Device Ecosystem Platform, the best of Microsoft and Android, tailored for shared spaces and optimized for Teams devices. Again, what does this have to do with Surface Duo? Well, it has to do with Surface Duo, that it involves Microsoft's Surface's Android team. And we know that this team is not a very large team, and this is theoretically the very same team that works on Surface Duo. We also know that there have been layoffs at Microsoft, a ton of layoffs, and their resources are probably now thinner than they were before. So the idea that they would need some people to go work on this business thing, this Teams thing that involves Android, and that they would pull those people off the Surface Duo team to do that job, I think actually does hold a lot of water. And what would the end result of that be? Well, it would be that we don't get a whole lot in the way of updates, in the way of bug fixes, and that is exactly what we are seeing. Now, another way to test this theory going forward is if April comes to an end with no Android version update, no Android 13. And not just April, but this continues. If we do end up waiting a really long time for Android 13, which I think is unfortunately extremely, I don't want to say probable, but I think it's possible. We'll say it's extremely, extremely possible. If I had to put money on, are we going to see Android 13 in April, May, June, July? I'd say we're probably going to be towards the end of the year. I think we're probably going to be looking at another year time frame from Android 12 to Android 13. I think just from what I'm seeing, from the progress that I'm seeing, from the other things, reading the tea leaves, this is just what I am expecting. If that's how this plays out, I think we can look back on this and say that, Shane, you were probably right, that they were in fact devoting some manpower off of the Duo project to go work on these other ancillary Android-related type things. And if they're doing that, the next conclusion that we can draw is that Surface Duo 3 is not close at all. There was some hope it would be coming this fall, But if I'm going to tell you that I think Android 13 is not coming until at best the end of this year, based on what I'm seeing and perhaps hearing the murmurings from the interwebs, well, that would indicate that Duo 3 is absolutely not coming any sooner than that. Because again, if Duo 3, if you've got your final hardware and you're working on this phone, you're getting ready to launch it this fall, you're not going to be pulling your team off of the software to go work on other things, right? So if I'm right about the first thing, then the second thing I'm probably right about is that Duo 3 is not coming out in 2023. It's probably coming out 2024 at the earliest. And at this point, who knows, guys, if it's even coming at all. I would say to those of you that are holding your breath for Android 13, or those of you that are waiting for Duo 3 to buy your next phone, I probably wouldn't be advising you to do either going forward. I hate to be negative again in another video so soon after being negative, but I'm just trying to communicate what I think is happening to you guys so that you can make informed decisions and navigate the world in a way that's going to be beneficial to you. Thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button for more content just like this. I will see you on the next one. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.